title of the topic session is The Future of Technologies in Manufacturing and the Factory of the Future. And with us, we have Mr. Tobias Hofmeister. He's President and CEO of MHP Americas, a Porsche company. Tobias is a partner at MHP, a Porsche company, the leading global management and IT consulting company in mobility and manufacturing. As President and CEO of MHP Americas and based out of Atlanta, Georgia, he and his team focus on Americas region, supporting clients from various industries on strategy, management, and digitalization related consulting topics. Over the past 20 years, Tobias has worked for several leading global strategy and management consulting firms across Europe, Asia, and North America. Completing projects in 10 plus countries, he has supported clients on a wide variety of business challenges, ranging from strategy development and digital transformation or to manufacturing and supply chain optimization. Tobias studied in Oxford, Madrid, Paris, Berlin, and holds MSc in Economics, Diplôme de Grande École, and Diplôme Kaufmann from ESCP Europe. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So as Ani was saying, title of the presentation is The Future of Technologies in Manufacturing and also, of course, the Factory of the Future. And you can approach this from various angles. I thought initially I'd give you a quick introduction on what we do as a company, because that will help to put things into perspective and also frame the whole conversation a little bit. And then I'll go in and share with you a few trends on what's happening in the industry, and also talk about what the IoT 4.0 journey or the industrialization journey for a lot of the companies nowadays looks like. So if you just don't mind to go to the next slide. Those of you who are interested, I put two contact details here. So that's myself. If you go there, you find my LinkedIn profile. And Greg Reynolds, who's our Senior Director for Markets. So he runs our markets team here in the Americas region, so for North and South America. Right. So if you look at our vision of what we think, MHP has been founded in 1996, so we have our 25-year anniversary this year. But we also have our 10-year anniversary here in the US, so it's a special year for us. And since the beginning, we've always been the premium business and technology consulting partner, helping customers to shape the future of mobility, both mobility and manufacturing. And if you go to the next slide, and I promise that's the last part about what we do, but I thought this puts things in a good perspective here. So MHP globally has almost $620 million in revenue, annual revenue, so relatively sizable for a consulting company with 3,000 people. And we operate in 19 different countries. And what you see there is a map of the world. Our headquarters here in the US is in Atlanta. That's also how Ani and I met and connected over the years. But also we are present in Europe, of course. Our headquarters is in Germany. We're very present in Romania, in the UK, in Israel, and also in China. So that's our global footprint. Here in the US, what we do and what we do well is operations excellence topics. It's customer experience related topics, R&D transformation, and everything around data and technology. And that's basically also what the focus of this presentation is going to be. It's going to be around R&D, data and technology, operations. So it's a combination of all of that. And ultimately, of course, the customer is always at the center of everything. So the customer also plays a role. We do have a lot of partners. You see them in the bottom left. That's one of the things that I'm extremely proud of. So we have a lot of partners that we work with, both globally, but also here in the US to leverage different competencies and also be able to broaden our portfolio. And yeah, that's it. Let's jump into the next picture. So what I brought along is a nice slide, and then I'll help everyone understand what this is. A lot of clients nowadays approach us and they say, Tobias, our core problem is not so much in the manufacturing space, right? They may have a fantastic product, they may have a manufacturing facilities that are actually state of the art, but very often it's about how do you connect this with, the customer. Now, how do you actually connect the customer with the engineering? Because the great products that you have, they of course come from an engineering, from a PLM part of the business. And ultimately then, of course, it's also about how do you connect the supply chain with all of that. And what you need in order to do that is a digital core. And that's where MHP has one of the biggest strengths. So the digital core can be, and in a lot of the cases where we work is SAP. So we work a very large share of our business is SAP related, SAP in manufacturing, SAP for also the engineering side for CRM. But of course, there's also other technological solutions, and we're agnostic. So when you look at CRM systems, Salesforce comes to mind, SAP CRM, of course, but it's also always then, if you store all the data there, how do you connect it? How do you actually bring it together with the rest of the business? And ultimately, that's really what the whole smart manufacturing and Industry 4.0 is about, right? It's making sure that your the overall company is connected and that you have a digital core. But, and I'll get to that in a second, but of course, key challenge is often what about the shop floor, right? The different options and opportunities at the shop floor level. So if we go to the next slide, and what I had prepared again is to look at the industry trends, look at the IoT 4.0 journey, and then our MHP approach, but that's more also a framework that should help all of you to understand what's a good way to digitize manufacturing. Put the car in the background, it's a beautiful car. And I wanted to mention that just on the side, we're an 80% owned subsidiary of Porsche. We're actually the largest subsidiary and the most profitable subsidiary of Porsche globally. And that's also kind of why when we talk about manufacturing and when we talk about automotive mobility and all those things, of course, we do have a large OEM in our background, but I can also share that roughly 2/3 of my business here in the US comes from outside. So what I'm sharing here with you is not so much the Porsche view or a specific OEM view, but it's really a view of a consultant that's been working with various companies across the US and globally. So if you go to the next slide, you can see what are the trends. So what's the what? Why do people actually even embark on the journey of digitization? And there's three different reasons, top level reasons why companies want to digitize. Customer centricity being one, total visibility or transparency in the business, being able to see what's happening, being able to track, to have full control. And then of course also business innovation, staying at the top of things, being at the forefront of innovation, and leveraging what's out there and what's actually new. And in the customer centricity space, what we see a lot is that a lot of companies want to move from mass production to mass individualization. If you look at car companies nowadays, or any sort of OEM, as a customer, you always have the feeling that basically you can do whatever it takes, right? It's not like Henry Ford who said you can have any color of car that you want as long as it's black. Nowadays you have, well, Tesla still has a limited range of colors available, but a lot of the OEMs, they have 10, 15, 20 colors available. In fact, Porsche actually offers you that if you have your favorite shade of green or shade of red or whatever it may be, you can use that and you can have the entire car individualized in that color, including stitching and everything. So, but you need digitization, you need smart manufacturing in order to be able to do that at a reasonable cost. Outsourced manufacturing, the old world, is all going more to distributed manufacturing networks. COVID has certainly pushed that forward quite a lot. A lot of companies are shifting from a way of producing things out in Asia or in other parts of the world and then shipping it into the US. Everybody knows supply chain resiliency is really at the core of everything at the moment. So a lot of that manufacturing is being changed. And then of course it's going from unconstrained resources where anything goes almost. And I've lived in China for 5 years and I've seen big factories there. And it's going to a more sustainable circular economy where it's almost a closed loop approach where you think, how can I reutilize the resources that I'm using? How can I make sure that I use as little as possible? On the transparency, the visibility piece, well, we definitely come from very deterministic models to predictive models, right? It's about predicting what's happening. It's predicting customer demand. But it's also in the manufacturing space as simple as predicting production, right? How much do you need to produce? Our CEO here in the US, Kjell Gruner, who's the CEO of Porsche in the US, he said Porsche always aims to produce one car less than they can sell. But in order to do so, you have to have good predictive models. in the manufacturing space, this also means that you need to know what's coming in. How can you plan logistics? How can you make sure that you don't have a lot of inventory laying around? Then, and it sounds simple, but it's really at the core of everything, is going from paper-based to digital to 3D to mobile. We have helped set up a factory where, in fact, whenever a machine breaks down, the factory worker can take the scooter or walk to the machine or the area of the factory where there's an issue, and on their smart watch they can actually see immediately what was the reason why that specific machine broke down last time, the time before. And then they can click and then they get an advice on, well, if it's the same problem, this is how we fixed it. And if it's not, they can actually use their watch or their tablet then to see digitally and use all the information available to either fix the problem or order new parts or do whatever it takes. Information silos, and that's one of those things you always hear about companies talking about teams and being one team and working together. Well, information silos are never good. And horizontal and vertical integration is what's happening. Whenever anyone talks about data and data being the new oil, sure, that's customer data and that's important, you can monetize it. But when you look at what's happening in the manufacturing space, it's all about using the data that's there and getting it together somehow. And I say somehow because I remember talking to one of the CIOs of a large automotive company in China, and he said, Tobias, you keep talking about data. We have all the data, all the machines in our factory that produce data every day, and I store it and I don't know what to do with it. I said, well, so what does it mean when you say you don't know what to do with it? He's like, well, first of all, it's all separate. It's not integrated. I don't know how to connect them. I said, all right, that gets you to how do you connect data? How do you well, you need APIs, you need to ideally get it into a big data lake, and then you need to be able to analyze it. But so this horizontal and vertical integration then helps to monitor machines, to predict what's happening with the machines, but also helps the top management, the C-suite, to look at what's going on. And then last but not least, business innovation. And that's what a lot of people talk about. It's of course the more the sexier side of things, really, sometimes, where you go from capital intensive manufacturing to service-based manufacturing. You're closer to the customer. You don't offer products but services. One of my favorite examples here is that in the past you would buy an AC unit and somebody would manufacture the AC unit. Nowadays you buy 72 degrees. So nowadays companies offer you 72 degrees in your office. So basically you have a service where it doesn't matter whether the machine, the AC unit breaks down or what happens, it's a service that you buy, and that service-based manufacturing exists as well. Taking this one step further, MHP has something which we call the Flex Factory. So we've partnered up with Munich Re from a finance side and with Porsche. And as MHP, we help businesses whenever they want to set up a factory to set up the most modern and digitized type of factory and offer this as a service if requested. We're moving from fixed production lines to cyber physical systems, right? So from, well, everything being pretty much touch and feel to everything, well, a lot of things being in the cloud, being virtual. And we're moving from manual processing to highly automated processes. I did think about putting a quote here. I didn't do it, but I'll share it verbally. Everything and anything that can be automated will be automated. Question is when, but I can tell you that in manufacturing, everything that can be automated will be automated. It's much faster. It's also much easier for a company when the machine is automated and you have full transparency to understand how to use the machine in the best possible way. Nowadays, a lot of companies, when it's not digitized, you have Sue work on the machine, and Sue manages 100 units an hour. And whenever Peter steps in, it goes down to 70. So question is Sue just better in dealing with a machine? And she would claim, well, I got a better gut feeling maybe. But making sure that you actually use the machine to their maximum potential, that's what everyone is striving for. And that's what digitization actually enables you to do. So those are the trends. So that's the what. This is why people actually want to digitize. Now let's go one step further and take this why one level deeper on the next slide. So usually, and I'm a management consultant or strategy consultant from my early days on, and it's usually about either one of those 5 value drivers. So when people talk about manufacturing and digitizing manufacturing, it's either about profit improvement, so the optimization of the margin per part, or higher quality of the produced parts, so less defects, right? You can sell more, or it's growing the digital maturity level, right? I talked about it already. Having a data-driven decision-making process and enterprise enables you to reduce waste, enables you to react fast and react efficiently and not opinion-based. A higher flexibility in production planning and changes in production, of course, is also another big driver, and it's something which is extremely important. Cost reduction is part of it, of course. I mean, if you want to increase profit, well, either you grow your revenue or you reduce the cost, but cost reduction, less rework and reduced cost, less resource expenditure. I alluded to that a couple of times already. That's a big value driver. Optimizing the processes, so improved scaling of production capacities, being able to scale based on demand, integration in supply and customer process and systems. That's super important. We're working with a large pharmaceutical company, and they've asked us to support them on a production line. And they said, well, how can we optimize a production line when they have 2 products and they want to produce it on 1 production line? And it sounds easy, but it's not, especially not when you're FDA regulated. Also, when you want to scale, how do you do that? If you have a linear production, where something starts at the beginning, and I'll show you a picture in a second, you start on one side and you end on the other side, and it's completely linear. Anything breaks down, you have a bottleneck at best, or an interruption in the worst case. And so a lot of the production nowadays is more modular, i.e. using AGVs, automated guided vehicles, driving around on the shop floor and making sure that you can go from one workstation to another very fluidly in order to be able to avoid bottlenecks. And then last but not least, of course, increased factory efficiency, higher machine availability, higher throughput and capacity. So, but you see, I mean, at the end of the day, of course, anyone and everyone sells products for money or to be profitable. I work for my team, but that's consulting. It's a people business, but most companies work for their products and to make money. So if we go to the next slide, and it's a busy slide, it's more of an I slide, and I know that's the one where I said I could probably talk a whole day about this, and I could look at every single part of that slide. But I'll quickly talk you through this and help you understand. So bottom left, you see those 5 value drivers that I just went through in detail. But what do they mean, right, on the manufacturing side? So top left is the suppliers, right? They supply goods, and they come in inbound into the warehouse, and then you need logistics, you need a warehouse management system. And that warehouse management system, ideally, you know exactly what comes in, because when you know what comes in, you know what your stock is, you know when you have to reorder. And you also, if you trace the trucks that come in, you know that actually, hey, they're late. For us in the automotive industry, customers are extremely happy when they know when the car is coming in, when they know when they get the car delivered. Well, in manufacturing, it's as important. It's maybe not as exciting sometimes to know when the screws come in, but if you miss a screw and you can't, or talk about chips in the automotive industry or semiconductors at the moment, but when you don't know when they're coming in, that's a problem. When you know when they come in, at least you can plan with it and you can do other things with the factory in the meantime. And then you see the production line there, and it looks relatively linear, but it's highly automated, and you see the AGV driving around. Quality and rework is, of course, important. You have an assembly area, and the assembly area can be automated. And then it goes to the distribution warehouse, and that's the bottom right, and it goes to the customer. Well, if you look closely, there's a cloud kind of like right in the center, right in the middle of everything. It's the cloud which connects the shop floor with the top floor. Shop floor integration, that's what a lot of people talk about, and that's where digital transformation actually happens, right? So somebody that's kind of like in the middle, top, comes up with a business case or the idea of a digital transformation strategy. They want to become more digital in order to do X, Y, Z, and I'll talk about the X, Y, Z in a second. But so they come up with that strategy, and then the question is, well, how do you monitor it? How do you actually track it? How do you become a data-driven company, for example? What do you need for that, right? And so that's what's happening, and you need the connection of the shop floor with the top floor to improve decision making. Helps with the supply chain, helps with the engineering. I talked about the engineering or the life cycle management, the closed loop approach, right? That's not only for sustainability, but it's actually for the customer. So it's the bottom right part, connecting the bottom right part ideally with the top left part. So customer buys something, and I go to the supplier, and the supplier knows how many more parts they need to ship. That's what you want to get to. what you see here is drones, and there's AGVs, and there's robots, and there's a lot of things. And we do work with a lot of companies in the Silicon Valley at the moment, or let's say at the West Coast in general, where we help them digitize their shop floor and the manufacturing process. And a lot of times, actually, we even help them go from prototype engineering, prototype manufacturing to mass manufacturing. And well, what you see here is pretty much all we do for those customers, and we go step by step and make sure that all these things are integrated and work together, and ideally, very often in a cloud. And the cloud is important to me because very often when you used to talk to people 5 years ago, maybe even 2 years ago, people would say, well, the cloud, that's not safe. And now we have clients come to us and say, well, we want to make it safe. Can we somehow get it into the cloud? So it's actually turned upside down a little. Okay, Ani, if we go to the next slide, and it's a great slide, and we can, well, if we have a Q&A, we may even want to come back to that one. But overall, it's pretty clear that over the years, every company in one way or another has started their digitization journey, and most companies start at a different point and level. And we at MHP, we said, well, how can we somehow visualize that? And we think of it as a subway, like a subway map. And a subway map doesn't necessarily have a starting point or an end point. And this one here resembles more of the London tube map. I lived in London, so I can relate. And from our point of view, there's no one size fits all for digitization, right? It needs to be customized to specific client needs, and also the digital maturity level of every end client. And there are 9 areas which we see are the main areas on the how for a digital journey. So it all starts with strategy, of course, at the far left. And companies require a clear strategy, a vision, a plan on how the current state will get transformed to the future state. Analyzing the gaps, right? Finding out where are the gaps, fit gap analyses, assessments, creating a clear roadmap, and that's very critical. Very often these things fail because there's a great idea, but not a clear roadmap. And it's almost the grout between the concept and then the implementation. Then, of course, well, real key to success is looking at the overall architecture. So the technical piece from the get-go. A problem that often happens is that somebody comes up with a great idea. They want to digitize the manufacturing. Well, but what do you need for that? What's the architecture? We have something that is called the digital production platform. It's a platform that Volkswagen has designed, but it's open for everyone, and where it provides an architecture, a platform, which gets into hardware and software too, but where it's the overall bones, skeleton of the digitization. So too many clients actually end up working on various very promising, interesting standalone use cases, and they don't work because they don't have the architecture. And that brings me to the next point. It's the use cases, building strong use cases that show an ROI. Sometimes clients come to us and say, hey, we identified 150 use cases to make our production more digital. And then I usually say, well, okay, but what's your main goal? What's the main KPI? And also, what's the ROI? Have you looked at the ROI for every use case, right? You have to somehow prioritize them. And the ROI, as simple as it sounds, is usually a very good measurement, a good KPI, because it'll help people understand the time frame and also the expectation on when there should at least be a break even or a clear benefit. So for leaderships and the middle management, for the buy-in, use cases are important. And the way that we usually talk about it when we talk about use cases is also that we say, well, there's desirable use cases, there's feasible use cases, and there's viable use cases. In order to do them, in order to actually make things happen, you need one that's desirable. So something where you say, hey, this is innovative, or it's great, I want to do it. But it needs to be feasible too, right? I mean, there's if it requires sending people to Mars, maybe that's something that you might want to postpone. And then is it viable? So it's my ROI comment earlier. Another area, of course, is platforms. So DPP, architecture platform, I talked about this, the digital production platform. We've rolled out SAP's MES, the manufacturing execution system, at companies of all sizes. And we just, had a project that we completed, another project in the Silicon Valley, where we did see how important it is to have the configuration and setup right from the beginning, from the get-go. And because, it's about this data, where does the data go, and how do you deal with it? And you can have the best hardware, and that's the next point here on the journey. You can start with the hardware, of course, and say, well, we have great machines and they're the state-of-the-art KUKA robots or the best Siemens or GE technology that you could find. Great, that's perfect. But you need to be able to integrate it. So that's a starting point, but again, brings you back to what's your strategy and how do you use it, and looking at RIs. Same with software, by the way. Software, the technology is great. Actually, I had a talk with my team yesterday where somebody said, well, they're a Salesforce expert. And I said, well, it's great. Salesforce is a great tool, but it doesn't solve you any problem. I mean, it does solve problems, but it doesn't solve you any problems. Same as with a manufacturing execution system. Well, it solves you a lot of problems when you know how to use it. And there's some people that are extremely good at it, and they can really transform manufacturing to not only the next, but the future level, but you have to do it right. This whole thing wouldn't be complete if I wouldn't talk about cybersecurity. So we have a cybersecurity office or a location in an office in Tel Aviv in Israel. And what we do there is we monitor the dark web. We help do that, but we also, of course, look at how can you make communication channels more secure? How can you ensure that machine-to-machine communication is secure? That there's no that there's no open vulnerability. And if there is, how do you close it? So that's super important. And that's probably, looking forward, one of the key factors that can also make digitization go wrong, even though it's one of those topics that most people understand the least about and also think about at the end of their discussions usually. And then, of course, ecosystems, organization. I'll just touch upon this briefly, but it's the ecosystem. I mean, the interaction with partners and suppliers and partners that you have on the procurement side is important. You can be super digitized, but if your suppliers can't connect to your system, then what's the point, right? You can then count everything by hand when it arrives in your factory, but ideally you want to have a full integration. We've worked with a company called Senator Logistics, great company. We've helped use what comes, or we've also worked with Kuhn and Nagel, just to name a few, but where when their products come in, you can use the data that's there and actually connect it to the warehouse. So thereby really digitizing it and creating value. And now that I've talked about 8 of the 9 important starting points, the organization is the last one. That's probably the most important one, even though I've said the other ones are also most important, but the most important one is the organization, because the whole endeavor to digitize a company will only work with the right change management in place, the right communication in place, and it comes back to the strategy. If the strategy isn't communicated clearly, then, well, my example with Sue and Peter, they won't care whether you want to digitize their machine. They'll say, well, let's just continue as this, and they can actually even make it go wrong. But if they understand that there's a value, that it's helping them, then you can set up the organization and become more digital and automate more. So coming to the end of my presentation, and I know that there's probably a lot of questions, but looking at, and I promised and I said, well, how do you start? Because all of this is all great, and it's a lot of buzzwords and a lot of topics, and I hope I was able to help you put everything into the right context. If we go to the next slide, you can see our vision for the Industry 4.0 journey. And this almost looks like my 6-year-old son could have drawn this on paper, but there's a lot of depth to this. And what I talked about a lot is plant connectivity. It also has to do with data forwarding, but it's digitizing the factory, and that's what a lot of companies start with. And this is, so it's chronological, this what I'm showing here. And a lot of companies start and say, well, we get data that comes from a machine, we bought a machine, we got data. So that's about data forwarding. How do you get it into your system, into your digital core, your ERP, or how do you make machines communicate with each other? Well, and once you do that, once you connect it, the second step then usually is that they say, well, all right, this is all good. It's fantastic to be able to analyze what happened a month, 2 months ago, but how do I get real-time visualization of what's going on? How do I get process control, live process control? And that's the second step of the evolution to a fully digitized factory. And I would say, even though there's 3 more, the majority of companies that we work with and that we talk to are somewhere either at step 2 or entering step 3, which is advanced analytics and insights. So that's really using what the machines produce analyzing it, potentially even being able to have somebody sit at home at their favorite armchair and analyze production data there, right, in a different environment, and making comparisons and benchmarks and figuring out how to speed up manufacturing. Third step, the fourth step is then prescriptive analytics. So really, benchmarking, looking forward, finding out when a machine is going to break down next. And all these things are not rocket science. Well, some of them can be, but and I think I mentioned it. We are helping a company produce satellites, so that's as much rocket science as it gets for me. But prescriptive analytics is about being able to improve the factory based on machine learning and based on data. So not asking Sue, how did you manage to get the 100 pieces throughput an hour, but knowing that you could actually get 110 and understanding why. Right? Why they were not at 110 before and what needs to change. And then ultimately, of course, the dream, I'm not sure if it's a dream, but at least the ultimate state, of course, would be an autonomous factory, a factory that runs almost on its own, where human interaction is minimized. Therefore, failures go down, rate of failure goes down, and you have the most efficient setup that you can think of. And yeah, it increases productivity, minimizes the cost, eliminates unplanned downtimes, right? Boost the quality at the end of the day. You of course also can enhance customer experience if you're able to say, hey, your car is lacking a chip. And while that's unfortunate, but here's what we can do in the meantime. We give you a loaner, or we do something else, or at least you know when your car is coming. And you can just decrease cycle times, right, to the machines. So that is our vision. That's usually how we start with anyone on that journey. We say there's a lot of things, but here's what you chronologically should be looking at. And I would want to finish off this presentation, if you go to the next slide, with a quick summary on what I think is key. And yeah, me being a strategy consultant, for me, it's all about defining the North Star. So any company first needs to understand what's the North Star. Where is digitization expected to take you? What's the core reason why you're doing it? Is it to drive down costs? Is it because you can't find the right labor, right? There's companies out in somewhere in places where you just can't attract the right labor, right? So that's then the issue may just be, how can we automate it as much as possible? Sometimes you have a lot of labor, but you have to figure out, well, how can you improve the quality? So there's different reasons. The second summary that I want to just have everybody take with them is every company has a different digitization journey with a different starting point. There's no one size fits all. Here you go. This is what you must do. It'd be crazy to think that there's a best and an ideal way. There's things that work out. There's some things that seem to work better for some companies than for others. But what's clear to me, and that's the third point, no matter what, there's no other option. So those that don't digitize fast, they will not prevail. And when I was at university, we talked about back then about, well, there weren't that many great cases, but of course there were some where you said, well, companies actually went bankrupt because they didn't see the change in time. They didn't see the tide coming. Well, there's quite a few now, and there's also quite a few good examples where you even see companies that missed the initial tidal wave, but they actually managed to jump on the second and pivoted and digitized and came up with a better product. So Annie, if we just go to the next slide, just briefly, what we say is we enable you, i.e. our employees, and also my my customers to shape a better tomorrow, right? We're not waiting for it, we actively shape it, and that's what we need to do. And then really the last slide, if you go to that, and that's just more of an FYI, if you guys are interested, then scan, and feel free to scan the left QR code, because it leads you directly to our the studies that we as MHP have done. And there's a very recent study on operating systems for the car industry, but that's pretty well, it's absolutely up to date. It's been publicized everywhere, and there's a lot of detailed information. But we also have studies on well, compliance, digitization and how to digitize. We have a research that we do every year where we ask companies how digitized are they, what are the learnings. So yeah, just feel free to go in there and let me know if you have any feedback. And then on the right hand side, that's my contact details. That's me on LinkedIn. So I hope I always get told I speak fast, I think fast, I speak fast, so I apologize for that. But I try to go through 30 minutes, and I think I achieved that.
Yeah.
And if you want to have a discussion, happy to jump in.
Excellent presentation, right on the dot, what we wanted from you. John, please start off. I know you have a bunch of questions there.
Well, you saw me writing notes. Okay, very, very good presentation, impressive. And I have a generic questions, and to some extent you dealt with it. But what are the prior requisites, the prior conditions necessary for your intervention brought in as a consultant, MHP, to be successful? And in other words, how do you prepare the groundwork? You mentioned that the management must be committed, but surely that's not enough.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I started working in strategy consulting when I started my career. And I have one specific company in mind where the team worked for a project day and night. We worked 3 weekends in a row. It was terrible, but also very satisfying because we thought we'd achieve a lot. And I remember going back to that client a year later, and the client opens the drawer and takes out our presentation and says, well, you guys did a phenomenal job last year. It was spot on. And unfortunately, we just didn't get to implement any of it. And I said, oh, that's unfortunate. So I did it a second time. And actually the third time around, that was one of the reasons why I said, I may as well want to go into something where I have more influence on the doing. And where I think where we are as MHP are different as a company, or where the strategy consulting companies, they have their right? It's the strategy, it's a top tier strategy work. Think McKinsey, think Boston Consulting, that's what I did. And it's great. And you can strategize and come up with where you want to be, your North Star, so to speak. However, nowadays, where the biggest issues usually sits is how do you conceptualize it? So breaking it down a little bit further, making it more tangible, and then making it implementable, i.e. finding out what is the organization actually able to bear. So it's great to say, let's become more digital. You could theoretically say, let's just replace all the machines, but that hardly ever works, right? So where we get brought in, where I would get a call is usually when either a company has already embarked and tried something and says it's not really working. So that's usually a thankful position to be in, because then you know at least what's not worked and you can work with that. Or we sit down with the companies from the get-go and they ask us and say, well, I'll go on the whiteboard and let's strategize and see where we want to end up. So defining that North Star.
Yeah. And Industry 4.0, Factory of the Future, comes out of Germany to a large extent earlier on.
True. Yes.
Would you say there are new trends in Germany attached to 5G and other aspects defining the future?
Yeah. So you're right. It was a government initiative, and I didn't know that for some time, and had researched it a couple of years ago and was very surprised. So definitely, what Germany is good at is export. So Germany, for sure, exports a lot of machinery, and that's why the Industry 4.0 is so important, because when a company or anyone buys a machine, you do want to have it somehow integratable to your existing setup. The data that I talked about is great when you have capabilities on the ground to actually monitor it and so on. But of course, it's when you have legacy problems or latency problems. So that's where the cloud comes in. And then when you have mobile data, Wi-Fi and 5G do play a big role. So to answer your question, I had a very interesting session with Nokia. So Nokia is one of those great examples. Mm-hmm. So the head of Nokia's automotive division is a former colleague of mine, and then we've become friends. And so we spoke about Wi-Fi, private Wi-Fi the other day, and talked about how can you use it, because if you want to trace something inside a factory, Ani and I talked about it, you can use RFID chips, right, or RFID technology. Nowadays, you can also use GPS device, you can use Wi-Fi to track, or 5G, because then you can also track it when you're outside of your factory and moving things from A to B. And that's definitely with 5G. also now taking this a little bit abstract also into the automotive world, also when you look at cars and digitizing cars, 5G is the game changer. Without 5G or without a fast connectivity option, most of the digital problems can't be solved because it's just then very localized. So, and that's where it's key to have that next step, where to have that 5G and to also have private 5G or Wi-Fi solutions like Nokia is offering, but there's other companies too, to bring that in and enable companies to have a very fast working integration of the data on the shop floor or in there and on the premises.
I have a generic question for you based on your career to guide some of our students. Many of them go into technology consulting coming out of MBAs or BS, industrial systems engineering. Is it best to start with an industrial corporate operation or to go straight into consulting? In other words, which way works best? I realize that there are individual cases, but do you have a general recommendation in terms of career pathway?
So first of all, that's a good question. So first of all, congratulations to all the students, because studying is a great, education in general, of course, is the only and best way to learn. And having an engineering background and mindset is, for what we do, extremely helpful. Unfortunately, I do not have it from my education. I studied management. So for me, I started in a different way, which is also what got me into consulting, but I developed a lot of my engineering expertise and background through my projects and also then reading a lot of books. But to your question, it is for sure the best possible starting point because it helps you think logically, helps you question things, come up with hypotheses and understand how you work using hypotheses. And that's the key in any business environment, where you have to have this idea and then you have to say, well, does it make sense? Does it not make sense? How do you create a business case around and be logical about it? And so that's what you learn. And as an engineer, of course, you also understand how machines work, and that capability in talking to top management is key. And you can always see that, of course, finance people that have a finance background have a certain strength in their career because they understand the numbers better. But when somebody has the engineering background and somehow also has the finance knowledge, that's super strong, because then you understand all the problems that a company can have, really.
Would you recommend starting out in consulting, in technology consulting, or in an industrial setting type job, and then moving over to consulting, or vice versa?
I mentioned I'm a fast thinker, and I like my fast-paced environment, and I love working with fast thinking and fast-paced people. So that's, for me, I started in consulting because that's a situation where a lot of the mindset is certainly fast, which doesn't mean that in the industry you're not fast. It's sometimes a little different, or not as fast-paced, because we see new clients, new problems all the time. Whereas when you're in the industry, you focus on one industry, one set of problems. However, having said this, you become a tea expert, right? Your knowledge, your depth goes much further than, for me, I can talk about a lot of things, and I've seen a lot of things at a higher level, but really going deep, I'm good at maybe one or two areas. But that's where for your students, if they're interested in helping customers solve problems and have that change, and if they like change, because you have to be prone to change more, then consulting is great. If they prefer a more stable environment, then going into the industry is great. And that's both ways can lead up at the same with the same outcome, really. I'm a consultant by heart, so I'm definitely biased also in my answer, I would say.
Great. So, John,
Annie, do you want to go to the Q&A?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John, thank you very much.
All right. So, okay, I think we have answered that question. You know, what course in college is helping you the most now? Your favorite books lately, from David. You know, what I would like to go to a different tangent here. And, you know, this was an excellent presentation, right on the dot. But my question to you is, let's say if your topic was the future of technologies in manufacturing, and we didn't wanted to ask you to talk about the factory of the future.
Mhm.
And then we are talking about US centric, the future of technologies in manufacturing in US.
Mhm.
Now, please take a scope of the manufacturing in US and take a stock of what kind of manufacturing we have and what kind of technologies we need to have to transform to the future factory.
Mhm. Right. All right. So great question. So future of technologies, the US is a powerhouse, right, in manufacturing, and Germany is much smaller. So for me, I come from Germany has the size of Georgia, and even though we're a few more people, it is really a scenario where we live in a country where manufacturing and production has always been a real, true, well, the focus of everything and of the economy. There's a few trends here. I talked about it earlier. It's the supply chain resiliency, right? It's about manufacturing. You can see now everybody, I think, is questioning, do they have the right supply chain setup? And how can you use technology in order to improve that? And I referred to that. So how do you connect where your parts, where your ingredients come from to your system so that you know what's happening? I'm trying to order a bike for my son, and it keeps telling me that it's not available, but I should check back later. Well, that's great, but I'd love to know, is it 3 days? Is it 3 months? Are we talking about years? So that's one thing. Another thing is you see that for automotive, a lot of the manufacturing has gone to Mexico also, both the US, but also Mexico. And but what this shows you is also in the same sense that production has come closer to the US as a market. So there's definitely a trend also to bring production back closer again into to the regions where the products are sold. But to your question, technology is a big driver, and my presentation is always, of course, as consultants, we talk about the innovation, but the bare truth is the majority of the factories here in the US, as anywhere in the world, to be quite honest, are at the beginning of a digitization journey, at the beginning of. And go into any factory, there's hardly, I mean, we work with some where we create new factories. It's great because all the machines are new. They produce data, you can use everything, they're connectable, great. But I would argue that 95% of the companies, they don't have that luxury. They have old machines. A friend of mine, he just told me about the fact he bought a big plant that was in Atlanta. And there were machines in there from the 30s. Well, how do you connect them? How do you digitize the company that's using machines from the 1930s and 40s? And you can, but then it's about being smart and maybe using sound detecting devices to establish or find out about anomalies, right? Where you can use sound to see whether a machine is running smoothly or not. It doesn't have to be a washing machine, but for a washing machine that works easily. MHP, we've done it for our own office coffee machine, and we were able to predict when it's going to break down next and what's going to happen. So that's where technology does play a role, even with old machines. So, and the future, where is it going? There's not a big bang. There's not going to be a big bang where all of a sudden everything is super digital. However, the knowledge and you said UX, UI, being able to work with machines and use that capability also from universities, where students learn how to be more forward thinking, I would say, and also thinking about the larger picture. That's what's going to drive production in the future, rather than just focusing on one part of the production side and then optimizing that, right? So it's not a pearl chain where you optimize single parts, but it's really making sure that the entire production is improved. And for that, you need a holistic mindset. You need to be, and to John's point, you need to be also aware of also all the technology that's out there, right? 5G, Wi-Fi, how can you use it? And every technology is just a technology. It's not making any difference with anything. It's the human mindset, the interaction that changes it. So that's where I see everything heading, is that a lot of companies will have to eventually sit down and say, all right, what are our options? Again, it comes down to what is it that you're trying to achieve to remain competitive.
Right. Great. Thank you. Thank you for your answer and excellent presentation. I'm sure we are going to have some follow-up conversation, Tobias. Look forward to staying in touch with you and inviting you to our future programs. With this, with your permission, Dr. McIntyre, I would like to invite our friend and partner, Mr. Alex Warner from Forward Foresight Foresight Council. So Alex, welcome.
Thank you so much, Ani, and thank you, John, for allowing me to jump in at the back end of the program here. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on the U.S.-India Business Summit. It was fantastic, and Tobias did an amazing job giving a presentation. If you would like to locate your company to the #1 county in the state of Georgia, I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with you. I represent Forsyth County. We're North Metro Atlanta, just about 40 minutes from the airport, and we are have the best school system in the state of Georgia, and the most affluent and the highest educated workforce in the state, and we're very proud of that. We use it as a heavy marketing tool on our economic development strategies, and any company that's interested in having a conversation, we would love to sit down and talk to you. So Ani, thank you for giving me the chance to give a presentation and speak a little bit. We are very happy to be a partner with UIBS, and look forward to doing it for many years to come.
Great. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, both of you, please stay for a few minutes. I have my obligation to thank all the sponsors of this program. With their support and their partnership, we have been able to bring together. Can you see my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, okay. Well, so Tobias and Alex, as you know, these kind of programs and events are put together with the partnership and support from organizations. We have here partners like Georgia Tech Cyber, Global USA Business Forum, UIBS, Georgia Department of Economic Development, Aditya Birla Novalis Group, Equinix, Southern Company, Georgia Pacific, US IBRC, Forward Foresight, USA Aiken, Gokre, Law Firm, Turkish Airlines, Consulates of India and America, Metro Atlanta Chamber, Connex, Next Generation Manufacturing, Georgia Minority Supply Development Corporation, Marshall Automation, and Manchester Trade, and some media partners. We really want to thank you for being with us in this closing session. Thank our all partners and supporters. And John, over to you, sir.
Well, it's been a great 2 days. We've learned a lot. Hopefully we'll have most of the videos available at some point to share. I know that we'll enjoy rebroadcasting it and giving it the widest possible audience beyond the physical audience today. Thank you very much. May I extend an invitation to come and visit us at Georgia Tech. I'm at Tech Square in the business school called the Scheller College of Business across from the Biltmore Hotel. And you'll be right in the midst of an innovation district there. We look forward to working with all of the Georgia counties. I'll say that for Alex. I'm a UGA PhD, so I have no particular ingrained bias. I know your county, it's a great county. I quite agree with you. And thank you, Tobias. I noticed you were a graduate of ESCP, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, I know several professors there, colleagues. So anyway, thank you very much. Ani, always a pleasure to work together, tirelessly, forever bound.
I know.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
On that note, goodbye and have a great Thanksgiving weekend next week.
Yes, absolutely. All right. With your permission, I'm logging out, everybody. Thank you for being with us.